Intro. The hidden ethics of desire. Imagine for a moment that every relationship is not just an exchange of emotions but an ethical experiment. An invisible test of awareness, empathy, and control. Most men spend their lives trying to get women to like them. They chase, perform, overthink, and end up exhausted because their focus is always outward. But in the quiet philosophy of attraction, submission is never taken. It is offered. And it's offered only when a woman feels something far deeper than charm or looks, and she feels psychological safety and moral power radiating from the man in front of her. Peter Singer's work reminds us that every human action has an ethical weight. The energy you bring into a relationship isn't neutral. It either elevates or diminishes the emotional space between two people. When a woman meets a man whose inner world is disciplined, whose desires are guided by purpose, not impulse, she doesn't just respect him. She relaxes around him. Her mind, built for protection and emotional pattern recognition, quietly says, "Here, I can let go." That moment, that shift, is the first step to natural submission. Not forced, not demanded, but earned through a silent display of inner order and psychological strength. Today we'll explore the two triggers that create that energy, not through manipulation, but through mastery of self. Because as Singer reminds us, ethics begins when self-interest evolves into self-awareness. Let's begin. The calm authority trigger. The first psychological trigger that makes a woman naturally submit is calm authority. Understand this clearly. Women are not drawn to men who shout their power. They're drawn to men who embody it. Every decision, every silence, every gesture of patience becomes a form of communication that says, "I am not ruled by my emotions. I rule them." Peter Singer often speaks about the moral dimension of restraint. How genuine strength lies not in what we can do, but in what we choose not to do. In dating psychology, that translates into emotional stability. When she tests you, and she will, she's not attacking you. She's observing your frame. She's subconsciously asking, can this man stay centered when reality doesn't go his way? Because if he can, her body interprets that as safety. Her mind says, he can lead. Her heart says, I can trust. And her instincts say, I can soften. Calm authority is not arrogance. It's ethical confidence, grounded in purpose, not ego. It's when a man's validation no longer depends on outcome. He listens deeply, but he doesn't overreact. He moves slowly, but deliberately. He knows that real influence is silent. Singer's ethics of altruism remind us that human connection is never about dominance. It's about direction. A man who carries calm authority doesn't overpower a woman. He centers her. He becomes a living example of emotional equilibrium, and that, paradoxically, makes her want to follow his lead. In psychological studies, women consistently report that they feel more attracted to men who make them feel emotionally safe without suppressing their femininity. And that is what calm authority does. It gives her permission to return to softness. When you speak less but say more. When you act without begging for response. When your silence has weight. That's when she senses that you are not just a man but a force of order in a chaotic world. And nature itself responds to that with submission. Control, Singer might say, is not domination. It's the art of choosing what deserves your energy. That's the first trigger. Control yourself, and she'll naturally yield to the current of your presence. The empathic logic trigger. The second psychological trigger is empathic logic, a rare balance between understanding her emotions and guiding them toward reason, not through confrontation, but through calm direction. Peter Singer's philosophy centers on effective altruism, the ability to act compassionately but with rational intention. Applied to relationships, that means leading not with manipulation, but with emotional intelligence. You see, when a woman feels seen emotionally, she relaxes. But when she feels guided intellectually, she follows. Most men fail because they focus only on one side. They either over-empathize and lose respect, or they become too logical and lose warmth. The high-value man combines both, empathy and structure. He listens, truly listens, but doesn't drown in her emotional storm. He validates her feelings but never compromises his direction. Empathic logic says, I understand what you feel, but I won't let emotions dictate our path. That duality, a warmth and firmness, kinda creates polarity. It's what Singer calls ethical consistency. Your actions align with your values even when emotions try to derail you. And women feel that consistency in their nervous system. When you can look her in the eyes and say calmly, I get that you're upset, but this is what we'll do next. You're not dismissing her feelings, you're leading them. That's the moment her subconscious registers safety again. That's the moment her body says, this man won't be lost in chaos. Empathic logic transforms argument into alignment. It turns emotional chaos into calm direction. It builds a relationship where she chooses to follow. Not because she's weak, but because your strength makes her stronger. Singer's ethical insight is simple but profound. The most powerful act of morality is to make others flourish through your clarity. That's what the second trigger is about. Clarity through compassion. You don't need to dominate her. You need to guide the shared emotional system between you both. You don't overpower. You empower by creating emotional safety wrapped in rational leadership. And when a woman senses both empathy and logic coexisting in you, she doesn't resist your frame. She respects it. Because her mind understands your ethics and her body trusts your energy. That's the second psychological trigger. Be the bridge between emotion and reason. Lead her heart with your mind and her mind will follow your lead. The silent consistency. Trigger. Every great philosopher understood one simple truth. Words inspire, but consistency transforms. Peter Singer often says that our actions define the real measure of morality. It isn't what we say about our values. It's how we live them, especially when no one is watching. In the psychology of attraction, this is everything. A woman may be drawn to your confidence at first. She may be fascinated by your composure, your voice, your presence, but over time she submits only to stability. Her nervous system watches, tests, observes. She's asking the most ancient question embedded in her biology. Can I trust this man to be who he says he is? Tomorrow, next week, and next year? And that's where most men fail. They start strong but can't sustain the energy. They show discipline, but only until temptation whispers something easier. They talk about control but live in distraction. Singer's ethical lens reminds us that the most moral act is to align intention with repetition. To be reliable, not because it benefits you, but because it builds harmony in others. A woman's submission doesn't come from your dominance. It comes from her relief. Relief that she doesn't have to second-guess you. Relief that your words match your actions. Relief that your emotions don't explode under pressure. This kind of consistency radiates an almost sacred stillness. When she feels that you won't vanish emotionally, she lowers her defenses. And when her defenses lower, her femininity rises. She feels seen. She feels led. She feels safe. Silent consistency means you don't chase attention, you build presence. You don't promise loyalty, you embody it. You don't perform for approval. You live by principle. That's what Singer calls practical ethics. The philosophy of living truth instead of talking about it. In relationships, that's what translates as emotional solidity. It's what turns attraction into attachment. You want her to respect you? Show her you can be predictable in chaos. Show her that your calm today will still be there tomorrow. Show her that your silence is not emptiness but structure. Then, and only then, will her instincts allow submission, not as surrender, but as trust earned through rhythm. Because in a world of inconsistency, reliability feels like power, and when she feels that power, she willingly steps into its orbit. The greatest strength, Singer might say, is not what you do once but what you do every day, especially when no one is watching. The ethical boundaries trigger boundaries. The invisible architecture of self-respect. The quiet lines that separate a high-value man from everyone else who merely wants to be one. Singer built much of his ethical philosophy on the principle of responsibility, the idea that morality means recognizing where your influence begins and where it must stop. In attraction, the same truth applies. Most men confuse boundaries with control. They think being masculine means restricting a woman's freedom, but that's not strength. That's insecurity disguised as dominance. True boundaries are ethical. They exist not to confine her but to define you. When a woman sees that your boundaries are not emotional reactions but moral principles, she feels something rare. She senses leadership, because boundaries say, I know who I am. I know what I allow. I know what I walk away from, calmly. And that calm withdrawal, that quiet refusal to beg, to argue, to prove that's what shakes her psychology. Because every woman tests to feel the frame, and when your frame is made of ethical conviction, not ego, she respects it, even if she challenges it at first. Singer's utilitarian ethics emphasize the greater good through rational decision-making. When applied to masculinity, that means choosing long-term harmony over short-term emotion. It means saying no to things that cheapen your integrity, even when they promise pleasure. So what does this mean in relationships? It means you don't tolerate disrespect. Not because you want control, but because you protect the peace you've built. It means you don't react to manipulation with anger. You respond with detachment. It means your kindness has boundaries and your generosity has logic. Boundaries make you predictable. Predictability makes you safe. Safety creates trust. And trust, paradoxically, leads to submission. A woman will never submit to chaos and only to clarity. Your boundaries are that clarity. They tell her exactly where your world begins and ends, and in that defined space, she can finally rest. Ethics, Singer once wrote, is the art of extending concern without losing direction. So be generous, but never at the cost of your compass. Be understanding, but never at the cost of your values. Because when you live by ethical boundaries, you become a man she doesn't just want. You become a man she trusts. And trust is the bridge from attraction to devotion. The purposeful distance trigger. There is a mysterious paradox in human relationships. The more you chase validation, the more it escapes you. But the more grounded you are in purpose, the more validation seeks you. Peter Singer teaches that moral action must always serve a greater cause. He speaks of effective altruism, the idea that true goodness comes from aligning personal power with global purpose. Apply that same lens to attraction, and you discover something astonishing. Women are drawn not to men who make them the center of their world, but to men who already have a world worth joining. This is the trigger of purposeful distance. It's not coldness. It's not manipulation. It's alignment. It's the unspoken energy that says, I enjoy you, but I do not depend on you. When a man operates from mission, every interaction carries direction. He's not looking for completion, he's offering expansion. He doesn't cling because his life already has gravity. A woman senses that energy instantly. She feels the quiet tension between his affection and his autonomy. And that paradox, closeness with independence, activates deep feminine attraction. Because evolution designed her to follow strength, not desperation. Singer's philosophy reminds us that human fulfillment comes from contributing meaning, not extracting pleasure. In dating psychology, this translates perfectly. When your purpose is greater than your need for approval, your presence becomes magnetic. Distance is not rejection, it's reflection. It shows her that your emotional oxygen comes from your vision, not her validation. It tells her that your time, attention, and energy are valuable currencies, not giveaways. And ironically, that's what makes her want them even more. Purposeful distance means you can love deeply but live freely. You can show affection without obsession. You can be emotionally available without becoming emotionally dependent. It's the balance between connection and individuality, and women find that intoxicating. So, work on your mission, until your silence speaks louder than her attention. Build your path so clearly that she naturally walks beside you. And remember, submission is not granted to men who chase. It's given to men who lead by direction. As Singer might say, the moral man acts for reasons that transcend himself. That transcendence is what inspires others to follow. When you live from purpose, your absence teaches as much as your presence. Your distance becomes discipline, and your discipline becomes desire. That is the fifth psychological pillar of attraction, purposeful distance. The space that reminds her, you don't need her to breathe. You invite her to exhale. The emotional integrity trigger integrity. The word echoes through every philosophy class, every ethical debate, every reflection on what it means to live rightly. For Peter Singer, integrity is not just moral purity, it is alignment. It's the unity between what you think, what you feel, and what you do, and in attraction, that unity becomes emotional safety. Because emotional integrity means you don't wear masks. You don't perform a persona for approval. You don't weaponize vulnerability for sympathy. You are transparent, not oversharing but real. A woman senses when your emotions have a backbone. She knows when your calm is authentic or when it's a disguise for insecurity, and her instincts react accordingly. Singer once said that ethical behavior is honesty extended into action. So emotional integrity is honesty extended into connection. It's when your emotions are disciplined but not denied, expressed but never manipulated. Most men misunderstand emotional control. They think it means suppression, but suppression breeds resentment. True emotional integrity is awareness with order. You know your anger without letting it control you. You acknowledge desire without letting it blind you. You feel deeply but act wisely. That balance creates psychological safety. It tells a woman, this man can hold space for me without losing himself. And that's when her defenses melt. Because she realizes you are not afraid of emotional truth. You can meet her where she is without judgment, without fear. Singer's philosophy of compassion reminds us that empathy without boundaries is chaos. But empathy with integrity becomes strength. When you embody that strength, you give permission for authenticity on both sides. You create a bond built not on illusion, but reality. A woman naturally submits to reality when it feels safe enough to trust. And emotional integrity builds that trust. It's the way you handle disappointment without bitterness, the way you admit mistakes without shame, the way you stay calm when she's emotional, not because you're indifferent, but because you understand. This is the sixth psychological trigger, the ethical heart of attraction. Integrity is the bridge between emotion and respect. It makes you predictable in chaos and honest in peace. As Singer might reflect, our emotions are moral data. They guide us, if we learn to read them with reason. When you live with emotional integrity, you stop reacting and start responding. You become grounded and steady, real, and when she feels that reality, she doesn't need control. She chooses surrender, not because she's weak, but because she's found strength she can finally trust. The inner peace trigger. In the quiet depth of all philosophies, there lies one ultimate goal: inner peace. The place beyond reaction, beyond fear, beyond the noise of ego. For Peter Singer, peace is not passive, it's active harmony. It's the moral state of a mind that understands itself. And that, paradoxically, is the final trigger of natural submission. Because nothing is more magnetic than a man who has made peace with himself. Think about it. In every interaction, you're transmitting energy. If your energy is anxious, she feels tension. If your energy is grounded, she feels calm. If your energy is peaceful, she feels safe enough to open. That's the law of emotional resonance. And Singer's ethical framework reminds us that harmony within creates harmony around. So the man who seeks inner peace not only elevates himself, he elevates everyone in his orbit. Inner peace doesn't mean you never feel pain. It means you no longer fear it. You've faced your darkness, studied your impulses, and chosen awareness over reaction. You've accepted that control begins where fear ends. A peaceful man is dangerous, not because he's violent, but because he's untouchable. He cannot be baited into chaos. He cannot be shaken by opinion. He cannot be enslaved by validation. That kind of stillness is hypnotic. It draws a woman in like gravity. She feels the steadiness, the quiet dominance of a mind at rest. And in that presence, her own nervous system exhales. Submission is not something she decides. It happens. It's a reflex to calm leadership. When you carry inner peace, your words have weight, your silence has meaning, and your boundaries feel sacred. You no longer need to prove your worth. Your calm becomes your message. Your peace becomes your power. Happiness, Singer writes, is not in receiving more, but in needing less. A man who needs little commands much, because he's no longer ruled by appetite. He's guided by awareness, and that awareness gives him a glow no status or wealth can imitate. This is the final psychological trigger: inner peace. The quiet mind that naturally commands trust, devotion, and surrender. Because peace is the ultimate form of power. It makes chaos irrelevant. The ethics of masculine leadership, so now you understand. The real art of attraction isn't manipulation. It's mastery. It's the alignment of psychology, morality, and emotion into one coherent energy field that others instinctively respond to. Peter Singer's voice echoes through these principles, not as dating advice, but as moral truth. He teaches us that to influence others ethically, we must first elevate ourselves, that a man who commands respect is the man who lives by principle, that submission, when it happens, is not about power, it's about peace. So let's reflect. Calm authority, mastery over emotion, empathic logic, compassion guided by clarity, silent consistency, reliability that builds trust, ethical boundaries, respect that defines direction, purposeful distance, autonomy that breeds desire, emotional integrity, honesty that earns surrender, inner peace, the quiet gravity that ends all resistance. These are not tactics. They are transformations. When you embody them, you no longer chase approval, you attract alignment. You no longer demand attention, you inspire devotion. You no longer manipulate, you lead. To live ethically, Singer reminds us, is to act from awareness, not impulse. And awareness is exactly what she will feel when she's around you. Because your stillness will be louder than her doubt. Your purpose will silence her tests. Your peace will dissolve her resistance. That is when submission happens. Not to you, but to the moment you both create. So build yourself into that kind of man. A man of presence, principle, and peace. Because in a world full of noise, the calm man becomes the leader, and the leader never needs to chase. In the end, says Peter Singer, the most ethical life is the one that helps others rise. So rise, not to dominate, but to elevate. Rise, not to possess, but to inspire. Rise, until your very peace becomes her reason to follow. End of speech.